On a bustling evening at Los Angeles International Airport, passengers hurried through the gates with a sense of urgency. Flight 317 to Tokyo Narita was set to depart in an hour, and the first-class lounge began to fill with travelers. Among them was Oliver Bennett, a man whose confidence radiated as strongly as the tailored suit he wore. Oliver's startup had recently hit $1 billion valuation, and his social media presence was a shrine to his own success. "Disruption is my middle name," read the caption on his latest post, showcasing him with a glass of champagne. "Mr. Bennett, welcome aboard," the flight attendant greeted him warmly, though her smile hinted at a familiarity with his type. Oliver nodded curtly and made his way to seat 2A, his luxurious pod for the 12-hour journey. As he settled in, he noticed the adjacent seat, 2B, was still unoccupied. "Good," he thought, "maybe I'll finally get some peace." Moments later, a man quietly slipped into 2B. His casual attire, a hoodie and worn sneakers, was a stark contrast to Oliver's polished look. The man moved with an unassuming ease, his face partially obscured by a baseball cap. Oliver barely acknowledged him, too engrossed in typing another clever tweet for his 500,000 followers. The flight attendant offered champagne, which Oliver accepted with enthusiasm, while the man in 2B opted for water. "Water? Might as well be in coach," Oliver muttered, loud enough for his seatmate to hear. The man responded with only a faint smile. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Oliver couldn't resist striking up a conversation. "So, what do you do?" he asked, his tone dripping with feigned interest. "I'm in tech," the man replied simply. Oliver perked up. "Ah, same here. Bet we've got some stories to share." He launched into a monologue about his achievements, but the man responded only with polite nods, focusing on his phone. Irritated by the lack of engagement, Oliver pressed on. "You know," he began, raising his voice slightly, "the tech world is full of overhyped figures. Take Elon Musk, for example. People call him a genius, but they ignore how reckless he is. SpaceX? Billions spent on exploding rockets. Tesla? Overrated. Twitter? That takeover was a disaster." The man in 2B chuckled softly, barely reacting. Encouraged, Oliver leaned in, his voice carrying across the cabin. "You think I'm wrong?" he challenged. "No," the man replied calmly, his tone almost amused. "I think you're passionate." Oliver frowned, unsure whether it was a compliment or a jab. "Passionate? I call it realistic. Musk is all hype. People like me, real innovators, are the ones building the future, not blowing hot air." The man finally looked up, his cap still casting a shadow over his face. "Everyone's entitled to their opinion," he said with a faint smile, then returned to his phone. Oliver leaned back, satisfied he'd made his point. To him, his seatmate was just another clueless wannabe. What he didn't realize was that the man's calm demeanor wasn't ignorance, it was restraint. The quiet figure beside him wasn't a nobody trying to blend in. He was someone Oliver would soon regret underestimating. Oliver's irritation simmered as the man in seat 2B remained infuriatingly calm, responding to his increasingly pointed remarks with nothing more than a faint smirk or a curt reply. Unable to hold back, Oliver leaned over. "Let me guess," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "You're one of those startup guys, crypto or AI, right? Seems like everyone's hopping on those bandwagons these days." The man briefly glanced up, his face impassive. "Not exactly." The vague response only stoked Oliver's annoyance. Used to commanding attention wherever he went, he found 2B's indifference an affront to his ego. "What's your take on Musk, then?" Oliver pressed, his voice sharpening. "You're in tech, surely you've got an opinion." The man hesitated before shrugging. "He's done some interesting things." "Interesting things?" Oliver scoffed, letting out a laugh. "That's the understatement of the century. The guy's a contradiction, preaching about saving the planet while flying private jets, hyping Mars when there are plenty of problems here on Earth. For the first time, a flicker of something, amusement or irritation, crossed the man's face, only to vanish almost immediately. "Maybe he's just doing what he thinks is best," the man replied, his tone as steady as ever. Oliver rolled his eyes. Spoken like someone who's never had to deal with real-world consequences. "It's all theory until you're the one paying the price." Their conversation paused as the flight attendant arrived with dinner. Oliver ordered steak, medium rare, while the man in 2B opted for a simple vegetarian meal. As they ate, Oliver couldn't help but notice how composed the man remained, eating with the unhurried ease of someone who had nothing to prove. "Must be nice," Oliver muttered under his breath, not having a care in the world. The man glanced at him but said nothing, his focus returning to his meal. As the hours passed, Oliver found himself growing more curious. There was a quiet confidence about the man in 2B, a presence Oliver couldn't quite decipher. He seemed immune to Oliver's jabs, unbothered by his loud critiques or attempts to bait him into an argument. And then there were the flight attendants. They glanced at 2B with an odd mix of respect and curiosity, one even leaning down to softly ask, "Let me know if you need anything, sir." Oliver frowned. Who is this guy? He tried to get a better look, pretending to adjust his seat. The man's face, still partially obscured by his cap, felt oddly familiar, the jawline, the way he carried himself. But before Oliver could piece it together, he decided to let it go. Just some eccentric rich guy, he thought, reclining his seat and putting on his headphones. Hours later, after several drinks, Oliver's curiosity got the better of him. He leaned forward again, breaking the silence. "All right," he said, his voice slightly slurred, "I give up." "What's your deal? You've been sitting there all calm and mysterious. Let me guess, you're a venture capitalist. Or maybe some trust fund kid." The man chuckled softly, not lifting his eyes from the book he'd started reading. "Close," he said with an amused tone, offering no further explanation. "Come on," Oliver pushed, his voice tinged with challenge. "You can't just sit here like some enigma and not spill." The man finally looked up, meeting Oliver's gaze directly for the first time. His eyes were sharp and familiar, too familiar. Before Oliver could put it together, a flight attendant approached with an air of professionalism. "Excuse me, Mr. Musk," she said respectfully, "the captain wanted me to inform you that your connection in Tokyo is confirmed. They'll be ready for you upon landing." Oliver froze. The words hung in the air, refusing to sink in at first. "Mr. Musk?" The man in 2B nodded politely. "Thank you," he replied, his tone warm yet understated. The realization hit Oliver like a tidal wave. The hoodie, the unassuming demeanor, the quiet confidence, it all clicked. He wasn't sitting next to just anyone. He'd spent the last several hours critiquing and mocking Elon Musk. Oliver's heart raced as he replayed every word of their interaction in his mind, the jabs, the insults, the condescension. He had been unknowingly berating one of the most prominent figures in tech. For the first time in hours, Oliver was utterly speechless. Elon Musk adjusted his cap and returned to his book as though nothing had happened, leaving Oliver to stew in his humiliation. Around them, passengers who had been subtly eavesdropping exchanged knowing glances, while Oliver slumped back in his seat, his bravado shattered. Their faces reflected a mix of amusement and second-hand embarrassment as Oliver cleared his throat, desperate to recover. "So, you're Elon Musk?" Elon closed his book, placing it gently on the tray table. "That's what they tell me," he said lightly, humor edging his tone. Oliver flushed crimson. I didn't mean anything by what I said earlier. You know, just talking. Can't take these things personally." Elon tilted his head, studying Oliver with an unreadable expression. Then, with a faint smile, he replied, "Don't worry, I don't." The tension in the cabin thickened, pressing down on Oliver. He grabbed his drink and took a long sip, hoping to steady his nerves. Elon, in stark contrast, radiated a calm that only magnified Oliver's discomfort. "So," Oliver began again, trying to claw back his footing, "you're probably used to people criticizing you, right? Comes with the territory." Elon leaned back, thoughtful. "I suppose. But I've always found criticism useful, if it's constructive." He glanced at Oliver, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "Was yours constructive?" Oliver's face burned. "Well, I mean, I didn't know I was talking to you, obviously." Elon's smile widened slightly, his voice steady. "Does it matter who you're talking to? If the points are valid, they stand regardless of the audience." Oliver faltered, momentarily at a loss. For all his bravado, he had no comeback. Elon, however, wasn't done. "You mentioned Tesla," he said, his tone calm but deliberate. "Do you know how many lives have been saved by our driver assistance technology? How many accidents have been avoided because of the features we've implemented?" Oliver shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I guess I didn't think about it that way." "And SpaceX," Elon continued, his gaze steady. "You called it reckless. Did you know we've reduced the cost of access to space by over 90%? That we're developing technology that could one day protect humanity from extinction-level events?" Oliver opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. The weight of Elon's words pressed on him like a lead blanket. "And as for Twitter," Elon said, his tone softening slightly, "yes, it's chaotic. But sometimes chaos is necessary for change. Ideas evolve through friction. Without it, there's no progress." The first-class cabin seemed to hold its collective breath. Elon's words weren't defensive or angry, they were factual, delivered with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. Oliver swallowed hard. "Look, I didn't mean to. I mean, I didn't think you'd be here." Elon leaned forward slightly, his expression firm but gentle. "The truth doesn't change based on who's listening. Maybe next time, consider that before you speak." It wasn't harshly said, but it hit harder than any insult. Oliver slumped back in his seat, suddenly feeling small in the vast luxury of the cabin. For the remainder of the flight, he stayed uncharacteristically quiet, replaying every smug comment and every insult in his mind. He felt a churn of embarrassment, regret, and an odd sense of respect. Meanwhile, Elon returned to his book, the confrontation seeming to him no more than a fleeting moment. Occasionally, a flight attendant would approach him with quiet professionalism, their subtle deference now making perfect sense to Oliver. The weight of the experience pressed on Oliver like a stone in his chest. It wasn't just about being caught in arrogance, it was the humbling realization of how little he truly understood about the people and ideas he casually dismissed. As the cabin lights dimmed and most passengers drifted off to sleep, Oliver leaned over hesitantly. Mr. Musk," he whispered, his voice low to avoid disturbing the quiet cabin. Elon looked up, his expression neutral but attentive. "I just wanted to say." "I'm sorry," Oliver said, his tone heavy with sincerity. "I was out of line. It's easy to criticize from the sidelines, but I can't imagine the weight of what you do." Elon studied him for a moment before giving a slight nod. "Apology accepted," he said simply. "It's not easy, but that's the nature of progress. You'll always face resistance, especially from those who don't see the bigger picture. The key is to keep moving forward." Oliver nodded, grateful yet humbled, and sank back into his seat. For the first time, silence felt like the wisest choice. Oliver nodded, his throat tight. For once, words failed him. As the plane began its descent into Tokyo, the cabin stirred to life. Passengers adjusted their seats, gathered their belongings, and prepared for landing. Oliver remained still, staring out the window as the city lights below grew sharper and brighter with every passing second. The dazzling expanse of Tokyo stretched out beneath him, but Oliver's mind was elsewhere. He thought about the countless times he had dismissed people like Elon Musk, visionaries willing to take immense risks, think far beyond conventional boundaries, and tackle problems others wouldn't dare to face. In his eagerness to seem knowledgeable, to project confidence and wit, Oliver had failed to recognize the courage it took to shoulder the relentless criticism that came with pursuing transformative ideas. The contrast between himself and Musk gnawed at him. Where Elon faced challenges head-on, grounded in a sense of purpose and vision, Oliver realized he had spent too much of his time critiquing from the sidelines, safe, smug, and risk-averse. That realization was as humbling as it was unsettling. As the plane touched down and taxied to the gate, Oliver felt a strange mix of emotions, regret, admiration, and a stirring resolve he couldn't quite name. Passengers began disembarking, their chatter blending with the mechanical hum of the plane. Oliver lingered in his seat, unsure of what to say or do. Elon rose, adjusted his cap, and turned to Oliver one last time. His expression was calm, his voice steady. "Good luck with your work," he said, offering a small but sincere smile. "I hope it's something that makes a difference." Before Oliver could muster a response, Elon stepped into the aisle and moved toward the exit. Airport personnel, discreet but efficient, appeared to escort him through the crowd. Oliver watched as Musk disappeared into the terminal, heading toward his next venture with the same quiet confidence he had displayed throughout the flight. Left in the wake of that moment, Oliver sat motionless. For the first time in years, he felt something new and deeply unsettling: humility. He wasn't sure what he would do with this newfound perspective, but he knew one thing for certain: he couldn't go back to being the man who boarded that plane. The bravado, the dismissive arrogance, the need to dominate every conversation, they felt small and hollow now. As Oliver collected his belongings and walked through the bustling airport, he carried the weight of an important lesson. It was easy to criticize from a distance, to pick apart the efforts of those striving to make a real impact. But the true challenge, the one he had avoided for so long, lay in stepping up, understanding the complexities of change, and daring to create something meaningful. For the first time, he felt ready to try.